Let's move on, though, to Twitter. Welcome to the Muskverse, because this is an interesting story. For weeks prior to this, Musk has been ridiculing our current media infrastructure. I mean, not for weeks, for years he's been doing that. He's also called out Twitter. He's called out Twitter's new CEO. And he's even talked about the idea of creating a new social media infrastructure to go against Twitter and others like Facebook. He seemed set on the idea, that the only way to protect his definition of free speech was to create a new platform. I've been seeing on Reddit for weeks that there were memes and posts where people were calling out Musk to buy Twitter, start his own. He's popular with that Reddit, Joe Rogan, free speech, absolutist community. And yeah, they were calling for Musk to either buy Twitter or start something new. And, of course, in a very fascinating sense, because nothing is real anymore and the world is crazy, it looks like Musk actually did it. Not buy all of Twitter, but it looks like he did kind of go down that route. Of course, Musk is a contrarian, kind of a walking meme in some ways, and someone who's popular with that counterculture tech bro, the Wall Street bets type of person who maybe smokes weed, watches Joe Rogan, but isn't really right or left, just kind of in that weird gray space of tech bro culture. I feel like Musk also operates inside of that space. So it's funny that the memes and discussion boards about him trying to buy parts of Twitter actually came true. I will also say that, I'm going to pick fun at Musk and give some criticisms of him in this next segment, but I also think he's a genius in a lot of ways. And what he's done with SpaceX, Tesla, what he wants to do with Neuralink and some of these other technologies, I think he's very important for the world, and he does have somewhat altruistic goals. He's obviously very narcissistic as well, but I'm not anti-Elon Musk. I'm not sure if I like him being the arbitrator of what free speech is, and I also think he has some pretty contradicting views on free speech, so we'll continue. So basically, Musk went from criticizing Twitter to just going down the if you can't beat 'em, join 'em road. So on Monday, Twitter said in a filing that Musk has bought 9.2% of its shares. Now he's set to join Twitter's board of directors and is going to have significant sway over the platform. Now it should be noted that CNN Business has said that, in quotes, Twitter said in a regulatory filing Tuesday that it plans to appoint the Tesla and SpaceX CEO to its board for a term that ends in 2024. As part of the deal, Musk has agreed not to acquire more than 14.9% of the company's shares while he remains on the board. Now, he has, almost 10%, which is obviously that he's the largest shareholder, and from what I've gathered, that's more than what Jack Dorsey had when he was CEO. So even if Musk doesn't have almost 15%, he still is the biggest shareholder, and obviously that comes with a lot of influence over the company. Now, since this has happened, I've seen just a significant split in what the public and the media have been saying about this. I have found that the public generally seems more willing to embrace Musk, but the mainstream media is just fear-mongering, just writing all these fear-mongering articles about it. I just was skimming headlines about this, and, MSNBC and New York Times and Washington Post, CNN, everything's like, this is dangerous for hate speech. Elon Musk is the worst thing possible to happen to this. It's just interesting to see how people view Elon Musk, because tangibly he's done some good things, but I feel like his persona, his internet persona, people dislike generally. So he's a really fascinating guy to me. But I fall somewhere in the middle of this, of course. That's kind of the idea of this podcast. But I think it's important to go back and understand why maybe he's done this. So I want to go back to last year, kind of late last year, November-ish, to start this, because that is when Jack Dorsey, one of the co-founders of Twitter and the CEO, stepped down. And that's when the new CEO came in. And I think this is where we saw even more condemnation on the center-right and the far-right about the new CEO and Twitter's rhetoric towards free speech. And I think that's where Musk probably was starting to think about this, kind of, because he's definitely, I think, center right in the free speech internet culture, and that whole side of the spectrum has been not happy with Twitter's direction and Twitter's new CEO. So back in November, Parag Agrawal became the CEO of Twitter, And he's a Stanford-trained computer scientist. He joined Twitter as a software engineer, and he became the CTO, Chief Technology Officer, in 2017. And he's apparently a close confidant of Dorsey, so they worked a lot together. And he is very forward-thinking from what I've read about understanding that blockchain, cryptocurrency, etc. is going to be a crucial part of Twitter's infrastructure and Twitter's future. And there is, interestingly, a good interview in NPR. I reread the transcript before this episode that discusses how there was a good amount of Twitter employees at the time, so back November, December, that were surprised that he was picked for their role. The interview discusses here in quotes that Agrawal worked on machine learning and other technical advances that have allowed Twitter to roll out new features and produce more quickly, as it has tried to shake off a reputation for being slow to innovate. And, innovation is great, and I don't really think Twitter's that bad, to be completely honest. I guess I've never said anything worthwhile of being banned or shadow banned, whatever people want to deplatform, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, I don't have a huge following on Twitter either, but I've never totally thought Twitter's this big anti-free speech bastion. Unless you're saying something, I guess, that should be said. But innovating is one thing. I always wonder, though, if machine learning is always the best way to go, because technically this company is the public square for dialogue, and obviously machine learning is very good, especially this company is so big, so they can't monitor everyone's speech. But sometimes things are missed, and yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on that one, and I'm not kind of a dummy on all this tech, but I at least know the words, I guess. But anyways, almost as soon as Agrawal became the new CEO, he came under fire from like I said earlier, he came under fire from pretty much everyone on the right. I think it's important to explain this just a bit because there was a tweet, it was back in 2010, that I do find kind of problematic for someone who's now running a huge platform for speech. The tweet said, in quotes here, "If they are not going to make a distinction between Muslims and extremists, then why should I distinguish between white people and racists?" End quotes. And of course the right, has completely jumped on this, and I can understand why. I mean, I think that's kind of not a great statement to hear from someone who is now running the probably biggest discussion and speech company in the world. So yeah, it's not a great look. Of course, that was 2010. I think their actions speak louder than words. From everything I've seen about Agrawal, he hasn't followed up on that or been for just that kind of just blanket censorship. So I haven't seen anything where he's actually followed through on that. Of course, people say things. We all say things. So, okay. But I could see why the right, of course, would not be thrilled with that. And I've listened to podcasts where when he became CEO, everyone was just furious. And now there was also another one that conservative commentators also pointed to. Apparently, Agrawal told MIT Technology Review in 2020, so more recent, that Twitter, like some other private companies, isn't bound by the First Amendment. And this led some conservative commentators to speculate that Twitter's censorship of the right would worsen. Now, I follow a good amount of right-wing people on Twitter. Just a side note here really quick. They're all still on there. Trump is not on there, obviously, but that one gets complicated. Marjorie Taylor Greene's not on there because she's been warned 3 times, and she said some quite dangerous stuff, anti-Semitic stuff, lies, dangerous stuff, okay. But I still see everyone else on the right that's noteworthy on there. I believe Tucker Carlson's still on there, so obviously that hasn't happened. I think it's more the fear and stoking the fear is actually what gets ratings and gets people talking more than if they actually did it. But since all this has come out against Agrawal, pretty much centrist contrarians and free speech absolutists all found that Twitter may be worse off. And I mean, I have a lot of opinions on Twitter, but for the sake of staying on Elon Musk, I think this is why he's kind of gone down the road of buying Twitter. So I will also say, just on Agrawal, one last thing is I don't think Agrawal has been too bad. Foreign Policy magazine actually had an interesting piece, I think a month ago, about how Agrawal's vision could actually help free speech platforms and information in third world countries, because so far it's been kind of a wash and actually led to disinformation, a lot like Facebook. And so some of these strategies might actually make Twitter better around the world, and I'm totally for that. To continue my thoughts here, that Musk has been hearing all of this from the right. He probably also cares about this stuff, to be honest. Like, he has a lot of money, he has a lot of power as well, and I'm sure he's been fascinated in it. But moving on, I also want to clarify that Musk has had experience in social media companies. It was his brother and him, I think, in '96 that did start a company that basically built online directories of classified ads, real estate listings, car deals, and entertainment events, and I guess they sold them to newspaper companies. As we know, Musk has dabbled in about every industry type in Silicon Valley and other parts, right? And I think it was called Zip2 or something like that, and it didn't go very far. But he definitely has experience in this realm. So, sorry, I keep getting off track, but back to this story. So Musk definitely likes the idea of free speech. And that is why I think his fans like him. He likes to say crazy things and supports others being able to say them. And yeah, now he is the majority shareholder of Twitter. Now, The Atlantic brings up a good piece on Musk, and I don't agree with all of it, but it's good to add some context here. It discusses how, in quotes, he will grace his fans with engagement, but he has little interest in critics. It also says that Musk's version of free speech in practice seems to be the one in which only powerful people can say what they please and escape any negative consequences. Also, according to the Wall Street Journal reporter Tim Higgins, Musk was known to fire people at Tesla that he did not agree with. So, if you're a free speech absolutist, firing people you disagree with seems a little counterintuitive. But also that sounds like Trump, who always claimed free speech, cancel culture, but then he didn't like people that disagreed with him. Also, there's unverified reports that I have seen in this Atlantic article about how he tried to silence reports of discrimination and racism inside of Tesla. I've also seen press conferences where he tells people to not ask boring questions, and he's even ended press conferences where he's not liked the questions being asked. So, I would say his relationship with absolute free speech is murky at best. But I think in his eyes, it's kind of an elitist look at free speech, which I'll get to later. There is also then the case, it's a little bit older now, where Musk had to settle a dispute with the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, because of a securities fraud lawsuit. I think this was back in 2018. Basically, he had violated the terms of a settlement. I believe he spoke about it before it was actually finalized. And it was between him and the SEC. And of course, he claimed his First Amendment rights were being violated. There was another example where this kid had created a page called Elon Jet. I believe it was on Twitter, that basically was very accurate in tracking where Musk's jet was at all times. Interesting way to spend your time, but, I don't judge. And apparently Musk offered the account and the kid who was doing it $5,000 to take it down due to security reasons, which I can understand. If you're a powerful person, you probably don't want the world to know your whereabouts at every time, but I digress. So I guess the kid declined the $5,000 because of the time it took to make it, and Musk just said, fuck you, and blocked him. So really good discourse there. Really good conversation that apparently these people like on social media platforms. But anyways, then there was the time when Musk called this reporter a pedo guy and was sued for it. And the Atlantic notes here, and it's something I didn't know, when the jury ruled in favor of Musk, it set a potential precedent for future cases involving online free speech. Also, the case was one of the first major defamation lawsuits involving a tweet to reach trial, end quotes. That's interesting. And now he's, going to be the majority shareholder in Twitter. Anyways, the reason I'm outlining all of this is because I don't think Musk is a free speech absolutist. He is more of a free speech elitist. In public policy right now, we're talking about how there is a lens of policy creation or a model for policy creation called policy as an elite preference. And basically the idea is that society is divided into those who have power and those who do not. It's really not an idea, it's an absolute. But this concept talks about those who govern and set policy are elites, and they influence the masses more than the masses influence them. And there is a belief that inside of this concept, that the masses are ill-informed, and that since the elites believe in fundamental norms and values for society, they should make the rules, as long as it's in the interest of everybody. But again, it's their elitist lens and perspective and life experience that is being portrayed on the rest. And I think you can actually see this in real time with kind of the populist movements on both sides that are very anti-elite. And I think honestly, I think you need a balance because in a sense, the elites do have access to more information. usually have worked in these fields longer. So just because you're an elite doesn't mean you're bad. But I think in a lot of cases, and this Musk case, this could be applied to people like him and many, many others. But just for this case, him. Musk views his speech as absolute and needs to be protected. But I don't know if he actually thinks the average Joe's speech should be protected. And we've kind of seen that play out, with his attacks on free speech when people can condemn him or disagree with him or call him out. I think he has a view that his speech should be protected, but maybe not everyone else's. And there's also the worry, I guess, that Musk may break some of Twitter's own rules and then think he's immune to them. There's also the discussion around Donald Trump, right? He's been banned on Twitter. Would Musk maybe reverse that? Now, a side note, I actually do not think Trump should be banned. I'd actually rather know what he's saying rather than just hear about it through rallies or some of these podcasts that keep getting banned. But anyways, after Musk announced this purchase of shares, a lot of far-right members of Congress and in the media and in politics have called for changes to Twitter's policies. And some of these changes would allow for Trump's return, which I'm not really against, I guess you could say, but I am against kind of allowing people like Trump to say a lot of crazy shit, I guess. And others have wondered whether Musk's involvement in Twitter could lead to a loosening of rules, which were meant to protect users from harassment and abusive behavior. And it is a concern, I'm always one who says we need to allow people to speak, even if the speech is controversial, even if it can be deemed somewhat problematic. But calls to violence are different, and I've been seeing a lot of just disturbing videos, which I'm not going to get into today, against, the transgender community, the gay and lesbian community, etc., that have been quite damaging, and they've been taken off Twitter. And, there's videos of a guy going around the South, he's, hunting minorities and stuff, and I'm just that is very problematic. And Twitter took the video off. I think that is great because that's not hate speech. That is calls to violence and someone actually acting on those calls to violence. And there's a very gray area which I think the right doesn't always seem to understand. And I do worry that sometimes they would accept people like that being on there when they're actually doing hate action, not hate speech. Again, I don't think Elon Musk is that hateful. I haven't seen enough evidence to say that he's someone that would just allow bigots and racists to start filming videos online of doing crazy shit. So I do want to make that clear. And to be fair, sorry, we got a loud vehicle out there. Anyways, but to be fair, the New York Post, which think what you want about it, did report that the Big Short investor Michael Burry, think what you want about him as well, I guess, did tout that Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter was a net positive for the U.S. Sizable stake in Twitter. Was a net positive for the U.S. and free speech. And a lot of others have said this is a win for free speech. I think it just depends what you believe is free speech. And I do think there's an issue with what is allowed to be discussed, especially growing amongst the younger generations. I see it in Chicago all the time. There's a problem of equating speech with violence, speech with harm. Making a joke that is insensitive is not the same as actually acting on a violent crime against them. I just do not believe that that is the case. And I do think maybe having someone shake up Twitter may not be the worst thing. It's not like he's the CEO of Twitter. There's a lot of people still working there. He's just going to have influence over what happens. And I'm sure we're going to see clashes happen. I am sure this is not the end of hearing about this because he clearly does not see eye to eye with Agarwal, for example, the CEO. So it's going to be interesting. I just wanted to do this episode or this segment here because I do not think Musk is this maverick of free speech like people think. And I'll end this segment with that.